You're listening to the Birth Advocacy Podcast. I'm Kira Walsh, and let's be honest, you're not here for the watered-down birth education you'd get from a hospital class. On this podcast, we're talking about the stuff your provider probably won't tell you, the questions you didn't know you could ask, and how to advocate for yourself in a system that wasn't designed with you in mind. Listen, I know you've got advice flying at you from your provider, your best friend, your Facebook group, and your mother-in-law, and none of it feels clear or helpful. If you're craving unfiltered birth education that actually prioritizes you, you're in the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back. You are listening to episode number 9 of the Birth Advocacy Podcast. And today we're diving into 5 unnecessary hospital interventions that you can decline and why you might want to. So, have you ever noticed the second you walk into a hospital, there is just suddenly a checklist of things that they want you to do? Like, you literally just walked into the triage room, you still have your clothes on, someone already starts talking to you about getting an IV started, about doing a cervical check, and they're already strapping monitors to your belly. Like, literally, you just walked in having contractions, and suddenly you're just this human science experiment. And if you don't know that you can say no, you kind of just go with it, right? But here's the thing is that so many of these, standard procedures in the hospitals aren't even backed by solid evidence. Now, a lot of them aren't even making birth safer. They're actually making it more complicated. And in some of these cases, honestly, it's straight up riskier to you and your baby. So on today's episode, I'm going to walk you through, again, 5 interventions that I see as a doula all the time in the hospital that are oftentimes unnecessary and truthfully completely optional. And I'm going to break down what they are, why they don't always make sense, what the research actually says, and how you can decline them without feeling awkward or stressed or feeling like you're being labeled as like the quote unquote difficult patient. So let's get into it. So first, I want to start with cervical checks. Now, hospitals are like weirdly obsessed with knowing how dilated you are, like at all times. As if it's like some sort of countdown to like when baby's going to be born. I've said it a million times. Your cervix is not a clock. And I get it. Like, we all want to know progress, but I can tell you firsthand, as a doula, as a midwifery student, cervical dilation is not a reliable predictor of when your baby is going to be born. Like, I just want everybody to truly know that. If I could scream that from the rooftops, I would. Like, you could literally be 6 centimeters for hours, or you could go from 3 centimeters to pushing in 20 minutes. And every time that you're getting a cervical check, not only is it really uncomfortable, but it actually slightly increases the risk of infection, especially if your water is broken. And hearing like you're still the same, or you're just 3 centimeters, or you're still 6 centimeters, like that can really mess with your head and mess with your mindset. And it can actually stall your labor. It is a lot of negative and downside for very little actionable information. So you are allowed to decline cervical checks. Literally, you can just say, I prefer fewer checks unless something changes, or just straight up ask, like, is this medically necessary right now? 9 out of 10 times, it is not. Or truthfully, you can just say no. Like, no is a complete sentence. And that is literally all you have to say for any of these. Like, you do not owe anybody an explanation to declining any sort of intervention. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain why you're declining. You can just say, no thanks. All right, next up is continuous fetal monitoring. So this one actually drives me a little bit insane. Again, as a doula and a midwifery student, somebody who's had a home birth, you do not have to continuously track baby's heart rate, like literally every single heartbeat for hours and hours and hours on end to know that you and baby are okay. Continuous monitoring means that you're strapped up to the machine that tracks your baby's heart rate and your contractions, again, 24/7. Which, if you don't know the physiological side of birth, like that sounds important, right? Until you actually realize that the evidence does not support it for low risk pregnancies. And again, everything I talk about here on this podcast is referencing low risk pregnancies. If you have a high risk pregnancy, obviously things are going to be a little bit different, but According to ACOG, intermittent monitoring, and that's like checking baby's heart rate like every 15 to 30 minutes, which is what we do in home birth. It's actually just as safe in low risk labors, and it's linked to fewer interventions, including lower rates of C-sections. But when you're strapped to the monitor, guess what else happens? Literally every single heartbeat gets analyzed like it is a problem, just like waiting to happen. Because the nurse is out at the nursing station watching that screen, pointing out literally every single tiny dip in baby's heart rate, even though D cells are totally normal in birth. And suddenly, they're going to come in and say, let's try to get a better strip, or, we need to get you in this position so we can watch baby's heart rate a little bit more. So, like, let's get you in the bed. And then meanwhile, you get stuck in the bed, flat on your back, trying to not move so that the belts stay in place. You're uncomfortable, you're fighting against gravity, and then surprise, like your labor starts stalling. And then what do they suggest? Pitocin. So again, it's a whole chain reaction that really starts with that continuous monitoring. If everything is going fine and there's no complications, intermittent monitoring is a totally reasonable request. And it's going to give you the freedom to move, which is going to be more comfortable. And it's actually going to help you progress a lot faster in your labor. So there are also wireless monitors, which are a better option. It's called the Novi, and it's just kind of like stickers that go on your belly. That's a better option. But again, you're still likely going to see them watching every single little D cell on the monitor. So again, just something to think about. If you want them to do intermittent monitoring, that would often involve a handheld Doppler, which is what you see midwives use in home birth. So again, something that you can absolutely request or something you can absolutely say no to. Now, let's talk about IV fluids, because this one usually gets brushed off as not a big deal. When you get to triage, nurses are always like, we're just going to go ahead and start your IV. But unless you're getting an epidural or they're actively going to be giving you medication, for example, like if you say yes to the GBS antibiotics, which again, if you say yes, you can also say no. There is evidence that you can research about that. But unless you are planning on getting a medication or you're planning on getting an epidural, the IV isn't actually doing much except tethering you to a pole and again, making it harder for you to move around the room freely. So obviously, fluids and staying hydrated are especially important, but you know how else you can do that in labor? You can drink water. You can drink electrolyte water. You can do all of these things to keep yourself hydrated without having an IV in your arm. And research actually shows that excessive IV fluids can actually, number one, increase your postpartum swelling, but number two, it can interfere with early breastfeeding because baby's weight is going to be inflated from all of the fluid retention, which they're going to see, babies, weighing X at birth. And then, they lose that fluid when they urinate, but then they're going to say, oh my gosh, baby's losing all this weight. We need to supplement with formula. So again, it's likely going to cause excess swelling for you, but then it also can trigger unnecessary formula supplementation for baby. So again, if you're low risk and you're staying hydrated, you're drinking water in between contractions, an IV isn't always necessary. So some options, you can ask for a saline lock. So again, that's like where they start the IV. It's just the port, but then they close it off and you're not actively getting fluids. That's an option. You can always add fluids later to that HEP lock if needed. But again, stay hydrated. You can say no. You can say, I want a HEP lock just in case. Again, you have options. Now, moving on to artificial rupture of your membranes, or AROM, again, breaking your water. Now, oftentimes this intervention is used to quote unquote get things moving. They say it's, let's do this before we start Pitocin. And it's one of those things that providers just love to suggest when they feel like labor is going too slow. But the problem is, and there are multiple problems with this one, but the problem is once your water is broken, that is when the clock starts ticking because infection risk goes up, the pressure of baby dropping goes up, and suddenly you just feel like everybody's watching the clock like you're a ticking time bomb. And the truth is, like, keeping your waters intact can actually cushion contractions and, number one, protect baby's position, especially if labor is early and baby's not quite engaged in your pelvis yet. Once you break the water, and if labor doesn't pick up the way that they hope, they're going to, cue the Pitocin and the cascade of interventions. And again, like breaking your water can sometimes speed up labor, But first and foremost, like unless baby is in a good position, they're already in a low station where they're really engaged in your pelvis. If you break your water too soon and baby's too high in your pelvis, there isn't that room for them to move around and change positions to get into a more optimized position. Breaking your water is going to get them stuck essentially. And if your labor doesn't pick up once they break your water, again, you're on the clock. They're going to start doing other interventions like Pitocin and all of those other things. So unless there is a clear medical reason to break your water, it's okay to say, not yet. It's okay to say, let's wait an hour and see how things progress. That does not mean you're being a difficult patient. You are just not interested in a fast pass to interventions, right? So again, you can say no. You can say no, thank you. You can say, let's revisit in an hour. And then finally, I want to talk about coached pushing. This one makes me literally want to stroke out, you guys. I cannot deal anymore with the coached pushing. That is everything you see on the movies or in real life. Mom is flat on her back. There is somebody holding both of her legs back to her freaking chest. They're going to tell you, take a deep breath and hold it for 10 seconds. And they're going to tell you to push like hell while everyone else is counting at you. 10, 9, 8, 7. It is the worst way to push your baby out. Not only does that put you flat on your back, limiting the movement of your sacrum in your pelvis, and all of the moms that take my birth class know, like I bring my pelvis model with me and I show you when you're flat on your back, your sacrum has nowhere to go. It is being pushed into the bed. So again, not the optimal way to birth a baby. So again, your body knows how to push. You don't need somebody yelling numbers at you while you're trying to birth your freaking baby, okay? The studies have shown that directed pushing, like coached pushing, especially while you're laying flat on your back, can increase the risk of tearing. It can lower oxygen for baby during contractions. And yet, some reason it's still routine in hospitals. Now, again, you have the right to decide how you're going to push your baby out. If you want to be on your back, be on your back. Most moms that I work with instinctually will not get on their back. They're either going to get on hands and knees, they're going to get on their side. And truly, like listening to your body is the best way to birth your baby. And that's called instinctive pushing. And it's where you listen to your body and you push however you feel is best. You push when you feel the urge. Again, you're not really going to feel that urge when you have an epidural, but really waiting for that pressure and that urge, that is what's going to be more effective. And it's going to be gentler on your pelvic floor. It's going to lead to fewer complications. And if you're in the zone and your provider starts counting or you're pushing instinctually and your provider's like, hey, like 10, 9, 8, you can absolutely say like, stop counting. Like everyone shut up. Like nobody is going to take offense to you demanding what you want in your birth. And if they do, that's where your doula steps in. But you can also be kind. You can say, hey, I'd rather push when I feel ready. It's truly like simple as that. You are not putting on a performance. You are not this actor in a show that they're watching. Like you get to decide how you want to birth your baby. So after all that, here is what I want you to take away from this episode is that you're allowed to question things in your birth. You are allowed to say no. And again, just because something is routine doesn't mean that it's meant for your birth, right? Doesn't mean it's right for you. Because I've said it before, I'll say it again, hospitals run on protocols, but your birth is not a protocol. Your birth is your experience, and you get to decide what feels good, what feels aligned, and what you're not willing to tolerate just because it's, standard practice or standard procedure. So at the end of the day, whether you are a pregnant mom getting ready for your birth or you're a doula walking alongside someone else, I really hope this episode reminds you that like literally advocacy is not about being combative. It's not about storming in, and challenging every single thing. It really comes down to knowing what's actually necessary in birth, knowing what's just routine. And again, feeling confident enough to say, yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks. Like, I don't want that. No, thank you. I could give you 100 different ways to decline an intervention. But again, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to say yes to everything just because your provider offers it, just because your nurse offers it. You don't have to go along with things that don't make sense for your body or your baby. And you don't have to stay quiet just to avoid making waves or being, again, labeled as that difficult patient. You are allowed to question things. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to have a birth that feels good for you. And again, not one that just checks off boxes for the hospital staff. All right, that's it for today. But if you're loving these episodes and you feel like they're really giving you the tools to speak up and stand your ground, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to rate and review the show wherever you're listening. And it really does help more than you know, because it helps this podcast get into the ears of moms who really need it. So again, rate and review, share this with a friend who needs the reminder, and keep doing what you're doing. I want you to keep standing up for the kind of birth experience that you actually want. I want you to stop feeling afraid to say no. And again, advocacy does not have to be a battle. It is really about standing up for the birth that you want and protecting your birth and your baby.